Good evening. Welcome back to Storytellers New Haven. We are kicking off our 4th season tonight. Good to be back, Kev.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't think that last time we met that we'd still be doing this virtually, but here we are. But grateful that we have the opportunity to continue to do it. So welcome.
And streaming issues. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we're having a little technical difficulty. Sorry about that. All right. So yes, we are back. COVID-19 has us still in our virtual mode. It has been quite a summer. COVID-19 pandemic. We've had the racial injustice pandemic. The world has been reckoning with racial inequities. We've seen our community really activated. There have been attempts at reconciliation around these issues. We're in the middle of a presidential election. Locally, we're seeing all the impacts of COVID on the disparate health impacts, on unemployment, looking at access to public education. We're even seeing an uptick in violence in our streets. So there's been so much this summer. And I guess I'm feeling more than ever the need for the community connection and the reason why we started Storytellers to begin with.
Absolutely.
So welcome back, everyone. We've been planning the new season and want to begin by acknowledging all of what's going on in our world. And in that, our call for continued storytelling and connection. As we're booking our 2020-2021 season, we really need you. We need your stories. We need you in our audience. We need probably more than ever to feel connected to each other through community. And that's really what Storytellers New Haven has been created for and what we try to do, even if we have to do it virtually. For those who might be our first timers or just getting to know us, Storytellers New Haven started in November 2017 by Kevin and I as a community building initiative. I'm Karen Du Bois Walton. I should have said that at the beginning. And Kevin, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kevin Walton, co-founder.
And tonight we launch our 4th season. We created this as a space for anyone who has a connection to New Haven to come together and share experiences of living in New Haven, working in New Haven, playing in New Haven, just a love of New Haven. It really came out of Kevin and my experiences in Bill Graustein's community leadership program, where that story is used as a way to build community and to explore leadership. And so we certainly want to thank Bill for that opportunity and for the way in which he continues to support us through Storytellers New Haven. Story allows us each to see each other, to see the things that connect us, and to see the ways in which we're unique. And so this is a city of about 130,000 people, and we like to say that there are 130,000 stories out there that we want to hear. And we're building a stronger New Haven, a stronger community, one story at a time. If you're a first timer, usually if we were in person, we would have you turn to your neighbor and feel welcomed by them. So in this virtual world, I guess we're going to have to ask you to say hello in our YouTube chat so that we can welcome you. Please feel free to follow us on social media, on Facebook, and check out our YouTube channel where we post all of the stories, all of our content. Well, want to thank Kevin Ewing and Baobab Tree Studios for their technology support. They're the behind-the-scenes team that keeps us going, whether we're in person or in this virtual way. And usually we hold these sessions pre-COVID at CONCAT, and we want to always acknowledge CONCAT and Eric Clemens for their support of Storytellers New Haven and their generous use of the space. And their students in their culinary program often would typically provide the refreshments. So although we are virtual and not able to meet at CONCAT, we do want to acknowledge them and let you all know that CONCAT has reopened post-pandemic, and so please support them. Stop by for breakfast or lunch at the Orchid Cafe and visit our friends at CONCAT. So before we turn to story, our format is we invite tellers. We have 2 tellers per session typically. You'll hear story, and as you're listening to the story, we ask that you think about some things that you're curious about, some things you might want to ask some more questions about. And after the tellers have shared, we'll we'll try to go through a few of those questions and give an opportunity for you to hear a little bit more. While we break for the summer, we don't totally take time off. And I do want to draw your attention to our YouTube channel again, because we did create space during the summer for story in some different ways. We held some virtual conversations where we could explore our sense of what was going on in our world, with, again, so much happening this summer. And we used story.
You froze. You froze. So I think Karen's saying that we used our YouTube channel to have a series of conversations, and so we'd ask that you go and check that out, and particularly Karen's Port series, where she had discussions with a couple of local community folk. And so again, we just wanted to stay connected and do some different things. And as we continue to evolve, and as Storytellers continues to evolve, we will look to continue to do some things not as traditional as meeting in person for storytellers, but other things that will continue to connect us as a community. So Karen's back.
Great. Thank you. Sorry about that interruption. So as we prepare to hear from our first teller, I wanted to share a quick poem that we've used often to set the stage. It's called An Invitation to Brave Space, and it's by Mickey Scott Bay Jones, who is also the founder of People Slippers. And Mickey says, "Together we will create brave space, because there's no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. The space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be. It will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side." So welcome to our brave space. Tonight's first teller is going to actually come from behind the scenes. Typically, Rev Kev, as he's known, Kevin Ewing, is our behind the scenes tech person. Sorry, we're getting an echo. Okay. Is our behind the scenes tech person at Baobab Tree Studios. But tonight he's actually going to take a seat in the teller's chair. So please join me in welcoming Rev Kevin Ewing. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here today to tell this story. I was not planning on telling today, but when Kevin and Karen came on, they said they only had one storyteller, and I have a story that I had been working on, and I thought I'd share it with you today. It's called Breakfast Money, and just let you know I haven't practiced it, so I'm doing this kind of off the cuff. We were talking in front of the laundromat he managed. Now, by managed, I mean he kept it clean, kept the machines working, assisted people who needed help. But the main part of his job was to keep out the so-called riffraff, which is interesting because in many circles, most people would consider him either riff or raff. See, he drank. He used to smoke crack, but now his voice was drink. But liquor was not his problem. His drinking was how he dealt with his problems. Liquor was his self-medication. There's a lot of that in the hood. We were talking about our plans to set up on the corner one Saturday morning, or several Saturday mornings, and cook free hot breakfast for the kids. Suddenly, we hear pow, 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 gunshots. I look out onto the parking lot, and not 10 yards from us, we see two young dudes ducking behind cars, shooting at each other. Pow, pow, pow. I hit the deck. I'm trying to dig my way under the sidewalk. I look back and I see my friend striding angrily across the parking lot towards the dudes, yelling, "Hey, hey, stop that! Stop that now!" The shooting stops. "Get over here now!" The dudes look at each other, look at my friend, then heads hanging, slump over to him. "Give me them gats!" They hold out semi-automatic pistols that he snatched out of their hands. "This is crazy. Y'all brothers. Y'all brothers. You supposed to be protecting this community. But look at what y'all doing. Shake hands. Y'all brothers. Look him in the eye and shake hands." They look at him. Then they sheepishly look at each other. You could see a physical shift in their bodies, like a fire was extinguished and they woke from a trance. They grab each other's hands, give each other a dap and a nod. "Now get out of here before 5-0 gets here. And don't let me see y'all beefing again. Y'all brothers." And the two young dudes trot off the parking lot in different directions. Back in the laundromat, my friend ejects a round from the chamber of each gun, leaving the slide open, and then he grabs a rag and starts wiping them down. He wraps the child around one and puts it under the counter next to the register. Finally, 2 police cars show up. I didn't recognize the cops. "Late as usual," my friend yells, walking out of the laundromat, holding up a towel-wrapped pistol. "What took y'all so damn long?" The cop sees the gun in my friend's hands, and oh my God, one yells, "Gun!" and fumbles with what I hope was his seatbelt. The other jumps out of the car and takes cover behind the door. I know he wasn't reaching for his seatbelt. And I'm thinking, great. I just wanted to feed the kids some breakfast. Now I'm going to be a statistic. Right then, the watch commander pulls up and gets out of his car. He knows me. "What's going on, Rev?" he asks as he walks up and shakes my hand. The other cops relax. "Ask him," I say, pointing at my friend. The sergeant looks over at my buddy. He knows him too. The sergeant takes the towel-wrapped gun, looks at me, looks at my buddy, rolls his eyes, and shaking his head says, "Never mind." He holds the towel-wrapped and clearly disabled gun in my friend's face. "If anybody turns up hit by a stray bullet, I'll be back." My friend laughs. "I'll be right here, Captain." The sergeant grunts and shakes his head again. The cops get in their car and they leave. We go back into the laundromat. My friend has this huge grin on his face. I say, "What in the hell was that?" His grin gets bigger. "We kept 2 kids from killing each other. That's what." "Huh?" Look, I gave them an excuse. They didn't want to hurt each other. They just let it get too worked up until they felt like they had no choice. I gave them a choice. I thought about it for a minute. Okay, yeah, no, there's no way that's true. What really happened? He said, "Hey, maybe it ain't true, maybe it is. I don't know. But you know what? It worked." I couldn't argue with that. Then it hit me. "What about the other gun? The one under the register?" You caught that, huh? Remember, the state got that gun buyback in 2 weeks. I can get $350 for that gap. That will buy a whole lot of pancake batter. Breakfast money, dog. See, brother be thinking. Then he took a big swig off the pint that miraculously appeared in his hand. I didn't want to get into the ethical dilemma this presented. I didn't want to remind him the repercussions if he, a former felon, were caught with a gun. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to think because I didn't know where I'd end up. There was so much wrong with all of this for all the right reasons. But is that all right? I don't know. What I do know is this: 2 kids did not die that day. 2 guns got off the street. And the first Saturday in July, we served 52 children a hot, healthy breakfast. The second week, we served 108 children. The third week, they brought their parents too, and we started making community. And that extra $350 really came in handy. Thank you.
Rev Kev, people are going to think that we had planned this and that you were ready for a story all along. I don't think they're going to believe you just were asked on the fly a few minutes ago.
Well, I do consider myself a storyteller, so I
had
that in my pocket.
I was going to say that you told that as a storyteller. So tell us a little your background as a storyteller.
Well, I actually never really thought that there was a thing called storytelling as a vocation or a career, but I've always been a storyteller. I mentioned it to my mother the other day, and she said, "Yeah, you would always make up lies." I said, "No, Ma, they weren't lies. They were stories. I embellished." So yeah, I've been doing this all my life. I've been on and off the stage most of my life as an actor, but there aren't a lot of roles for big black guys. So that's how I got into technical theater. And from technical theater, I got into technical television and film and all that stuff.
Right.
So I've been, and then I'm a preacher. So I'm always telling stories about the love of God.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So did you continue to have a relationship with the gentleman you shared with us?
Oh yeah, he's still in town. He's still in town, and he's still serving breakfasts in New Hallville.
And what about the 2 young men? Did you ever see them again? And
I see one of them every once in a while. The other one I did not know, and so I haven't seen them. But the other one I see every once in a while. They're still out hustling, trying to make it in the streets.
Yeah.
You know, the typical story of a broken home and inadequate education, and nobody really pushing them.
You know, it's a powerful story of interruption there, right? And I mean, he played this role of interrupting, and who knows how the story would have gone had he not intervened. But I think all too often when we see violence in our community, it's a story where an interruption didn't happen, where somebody who maybe could have changed the course, didn't feel empowered or enabled or that it was their role to be involved in somebody else's life. So
I used to be a cop in St. Louis, and I got some stories about that. But I remember my first day in uniform in Kenlock, Missouri, which is a little small town, one of the first black incorporated town in Missouri, I believe. And I was riding around in my training officer, and we would ride around seeing all these guys just hanging out on the street and doing nothing. And he looked at him, and he looked at me, and he said, "You know what? The cure to cancer could be one of those mines out there right now, and we may never find out because we're not reaching out to them."
Yeah.
And so that's kind of been my theory. I've seen some really brilliant people who are the most ignorant folks on the street, and they're brilliant if they could, if just things would align right for them. This world could be so much better.
Absolutely. Let's see so we do have our YouTube audience. So first there are folks who felt like you were holding out on them, didn't know that you were going to be telling. So We just want folks to know that this was not a secret Kevin kept from you. He stepped in for us. A lot of praise here. You're a star. Denise Page is so glad you're on the other side now too. And wants to make sure we still have you behind the camera. Karima, love this story. Someone else who thought it was a tremendous, fantastic. And Kathleen, many of your sermons are stories worth hearing. So a lot of fans of your storytelling.
Well, thank you. And they will all receive their checks next week for the comments. I can say that this is live.
It is live. It is live. They are hearing that. Our other Kevin, did you have any question?
You're muted.
You're on mute, Kev.
Yeah, my question is, why didn't you choose to go last this evening?
Because you wanted the anchor spot, no? I was thinking, why didn't I wear a purple shirt?
Yeah. So I do have a question though. So because you mentioned that you're riding around and we often talk about some of the young people who get caught up could be, like you said, the person who cures cancer, and things of that nature. So how do we get to them earlier? So before we have to intervene?
You know what? I think we kind of are. I think there's a lot of early childhood. There could always be more interaction with the young people. I think we're losing them somewhere around junior high school. In high school, like in the hood, they say when they start stepping off the porch, that's when we start losing them. When they start getting out there and getting on their own, there aren't a lot. And then when they get into their late teens and early 20s, there's hardly no programs available to them unless they go through the criminal justice system. And so, I think we're catching them early. I think we're losing them midway.
Yeah, that's a way to look at it. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. So again, everybody, please join me in thanking Rev Kev for his storytelling tonight, in addition to all of the support he provides to us. That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going back to my hole.
All right. So we have a tradition now with Storytellers New Haven, as we are into our 4th season, where one of the co-founders of Storytellers tells a story to start our season and to wrap up our season. So in either September or June, you will get some offering of story from Kevin or I. So I ended in June, and so Kevin is up to start our season off. So he will be our second teller this evening. Kevin is obviously no stranger. He is a co-founder of Storytellers New Haven and has sat in the teller's chair before. Professionally, he's a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional who works in HR in our area regional school district. His first loves are coaching and young people, and he brings his passion to his work as a high school basketball coach. A native of Staten Island, New York, he's made New Haven his home for over 25 years. Please welcome Kevin to the teller's chair. And as he's telling, remember, if there are things you're curious about, things you'd like to know more about, that's what we hope. Type those questions in our YouTube chat and we'll ask them when he finishes telling. Kevin, welcome to the chair. Kev, you're on mute.
You would think after all this time of doing Zooms and Teams that I would know to hit mute before.
That's okay.
So, well, thank you for starting another tradition, right? I guess that's how traditions are built. You build them as you go. So now the tradition is that one of us will end and one of us will start. So please, audience, keep that in mind that Karen is up in June. So this is a story of self-reflection and introspection. And I wrote it down, and I will be referring to notes because it's one that has evolved since March. Self-reflection is defined as meditation or serious thought about one's character, actions, and motives. Human self-reflection is the capacity of humans to exercise introspection and to attempt to learn more about their fundamental nature and essence. Introspection is defined as the examination or observation of one's mental and emotional processes. Introspection is the examination of one's conscious thought and feelings. The process of introspection relies on the observation of one's mental state. And in a spiritual context, it may refer to the examination of one's soul. And given that this story starts on March 13th, this has been quite the examination of my soul. So the first story I told at the end of season 2, I was sure I was going to tell. If you may recall, it was about my upbringing and my childhood growing up in Staten Island, New York. I told you about the mentors that shaped my life. I told you about being raised by my grandmother and my aunts and uncles and a stepfather and a community that provided the protection I have not felt since leaving in 1986. Yes, I was confident about that story because it was burning in me. I wanted the world to know how I got to be the Kevin Walton that you know today. The story I'm going to share this evening starts on March 13th, 2020. That is the day that we were told at work that the state will be closing down on March 16th, and we will be working from home as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. As I may recall, COVID had been all over the news, especially in this MSNBC, which is on in our home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is when people started to believe that COVID-19 was not a hoax. I, however, felt the seriousness of COVID earlier in the week when the state basketball tournament was postponed on Tuesday, March 8th. I'm sorry, March 8th, after the first rounds of games being played. We were scheduled to play East Catholic on Wednesday, but we got the terrible news on Tuesday that we would not be playing. We were heartbroken for our kids, especially our seniors, given that this would be their last experience playing high school, but we also felt we had an opportunity to win the first championship in Wilbercross in decades. That day, I was interviewed by one of the local TV reporters regarding the cancellation of the season and moving forward. And at that point, I declared that Wilbercross was the 2020 state champions. And so it is said to be because I was the only one able to declare it on TV. And to put it in perspective, a week earlier, March 4th, we won the SEC championship and had dreams of winning the state championship. In the words of the great philosopher Sean Carter, aka Jay-Z, it was all good a week ago. With total uncertainty of what to expect, we quickly pivoted from everyday hustle and bustle of this thing called life to a full-on lockdown due to the pandemic. With reports of people getting gravely ill and dying, being inundated with reports of people literally here 1 minute and gone the next. The story of people dying alone in the hospitals by themselves. I remember thinking to myself, the universe is talking to us. The universe is telling us that she needs a reset. I had no problem with the universe needing a reset. In fact, I fully expected one during my lifetime, although I thought it would be a meteorite. Never did I think it would be the result of a disease. Not with America being the richest state in the world, richest country in the world, and having the best doctors and having a pandemic plan in place. Oh yes, we did have a pandemic plan in place. I forgot. After all, we stopped Ebola dead in its tracks. I believed that our government would save us. Clearly, I was mistaken. I was once again reminded that leadership matters. And some 200,000 COVID-related deaths later, leadership matters now even more than ever. We were in uncharted territory. The world was on lockdown. Ken and I needed to take precaution. We brought Kevin home from Washington, D.C. That was a no-brainer for us to have him home. We figured if we were going to have to feed him and clothe him and provide shelter, we might as well do it right here from our home, knowing that he's with us and not having to cash app him every other week. And the University of Hartford was closing, so Kayla would be coming home as well. Unexpectedly, the five of us were back under the same roof for the foreseeable future. Coleman, our four-legged family member, was excited. His 2 additional food sources were back. With all the reports of the potential loss of jobs and incomes, I did what a lot of Americans did. I exercised my Second Amendment right. To no surprise, I was not the only one. A usually 1-hour process took 3.5 hours. We also brought enough food and water to last us 2 months, but for some reason, did not feel a need to stockpile toilet paper. We were prepared to hunker down. As my anxiety started to reside, I started to think about what we would do to pass the time. Sure, I would be busy working from home with plenty of assignments to keep me busy. I was thinking about the times that we'd usually spend outside the house on evenings and weekends. We went from being out 4 nights a week to a 24-hour lockdown. Priority number 1 was to stay healthy and to keep my family healthy. This was going to take some self-reflecting. What is it that I have wanted to do that I just not have had the time to do? I've always wanted to do a podcast, but didn't really know how. In fact, I had been discussing that possibility with Kevin Ewing and Bayo Bob Studios, but this lockdown certainly was going to put that on hold, or would it? I did some research and found out that I could purchase the equipment and do it from my dining room / office / lunchroom / conference room. As of March 16th, 2020, Connecticut would be closed. So Junior, Caleb, and myself went to Sam Ash and purchased the needed equipment, and the Main Event podcast was born. That same equipment was also shared by Junior and Caleb as they took the time to create their own podcast called Whose Mans Is This?, as well as continuing to create their music. Some of you know that Junior is a hip-hop artist. He has dropped 3 albums and numerous singles and has performed in Washington, D.C., New York, and Connecticut. I totally expected that he would be creating music and he will be dropping his 4th album this week. To our surprise, though, we discovered that Caleb, too, was an inspiring hip-hop artist. But in reflection, this should not have been a surprise at all. See, Caleb loves his big brother and looks up to him immensely. He may deny that, but I see the pattern. He follows his brother's footsteps. It's not also surprising because he's always been a performer. Since he was young, he was always dancing, singing, and could remember to line to every movie, appropriate and inappropriate to mankind. And being a hip hop artist is right up his alley. And as much as they are alike, they are different. To see this, you have to look no further than their music. It is quite the contrast. They are also, however, they are both very creative and very talented. And during this time, they also created their own entertainment company entitled Elm City Records. While thinking about how these two were moving, I did some reflection on how they got to the point where they wanted to impact the world through music and movies and other forms of entertainment. Had I missed the sign? Had they told me and I not listened? Or had they not told me because I wasn't listening? Did they want to go to college, or was that my dream for them? Had they wanted to always be entertainers, but through my messaging, formally and informally, had I somehow suggested that I would not be supportive of that dream? Through introspection, I could only help to think perhaps some of my life failures would be transferred to them. At this point, we were all set to pass our time creating podcasts and music. I also thought I would write that long-awaited book, but that might have to wait until the next pandemic. On May 10th, things took a turn. On May 10th, the world learned what Brunswick, Georgia Police Department and the people of Brunswick, Georgia knew on February 23rd, 2020, that Ahmaud Arbery was chased down and executed by a father and son duo while he was jogging. Then on May 15th, we learned that Breonna Taylor, a Black woman, was shot and killed by police officers in Louisville, Kentucky, while she slept in her bed. As shocking and hard to believe this is to some, an unarmed Black man and an unarmed Black woman being shot by police and vigilantes is commonplace to others. Reminding of us of Trayvon, Tamir, Mike, Sandra, Eric, Sean, Amadou, Jason, and Atiana, just to name a few of the countless. These are some of the names that we speak of when we say their names. We have grieved them all to the point that we are on a first name basis. If you know, then you know. However, it wasn't until May 25th when the world watched in horror as 4 Minnesota police officers murdered George Floyd. When I first watched the video, I did not have a real reaction. My non-reaction scared me because there was no reaction. Initially, I watched the video with no sound, but I could still vividly see the evil in Derek Chauvin's eyes as he callously looked into the camera. I remember asking myself, what did I just watch? Why didn't I have a reaction? Was I numb to Black death? Nah, this is different. I remember asking Karen if she had seen the video. I can't remember if she had at that point. However, I watched the video again, this time with sound. I can remember how angry I was and how angry I got with each passing minute. After 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I was furious. 2 cops on his leg, 1 cop on top with a knee in his neck, 1 officer serving as crowd control. It reminded him of me when we were young, when there was a fight, and there was always that one person ensuring that no one would jump into the fight. That was his role, to ensure that no one intervened. Little did he know that America was watching. And little did America know that the world was watching. And the world was going to intervene, albeit too late for George Floyd. If the murder of an unarmed Black woman at the hands of white police officers and the murder of a Black man by armed vigilantes pushed a country already on the edge to the brink, the live execution of George Floyd sent us over the edge. Pardon me as I will refer to a line from my favorite musical, Hamilton. We are a powder keg about to explode, and the video seen around the world was the match that lit the fuse. These events tested my resolve. See, I believe in the promise of America. I believe the Declaration of Independence. I believe the words, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that amongst us, these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I believe that this country belongs to Black and brown people just as much as it does white people. Hell, we built it. It is off the back of our ancestors that provided untold wealth to so many Americans who are quick to tell people to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. It is the centuries of free labor that propelled the United States of America to be the richest country in the world. My thoughts are, if your people were not here prior to 1492, you are an immigrant just like the rest of us. So how dare you claim to discover that something that wasn't lost? I feel a kindred connection to James Baldwin, who too loved this country. In fact, it was Baldwin who said, I love America more than any country in the world. And exactly for this reason, I insist on the right to criticize her perpetually. Walton also said, to be Black and conscious in America is to be a constant state of rage. And that I am. This is why we need to be introspective. This is where my need to be introspective comes into play. Los Angeles Clippers Doc River poignantly stated, we keep loving this country, and this country does not love us back. A couple of years ago, I shared with you that I grew up in a diverse community in Staten Island, New York. Although my public housing development was predominantly Black, the community of New Brighton was mixed, ethnically, racially, and socioeconomically. I attended public school for kindergarten, but my mother was advised to put me in a school with a more structured environment. So I landed at St. Peter's Elementary School. From 1st to 8th grade, I went to school with probably the most diverse environment that I had been in my entire life. In fact, the only thing that comes close to this experience was my time in CLP with Cohort 21. It was my St. Peter's Elementary experience that provided me with the foundation to be able to interact with people from all walks of life. We lived a real-life diverse experience. That's why I can't help to wonder if my classmates feel as cheated as I do. Cheated at being taught what America was really about. I can't help but wonder what my life would be like had I learned in my formative years the real history of America. Imagine the disappointment I felt when I learned that Miles Standish was not the welcoming pilgrim he was portrayed as those textbooks. What would America be like if we learned the real story of how smallpox and influenza and cold-blooded murder all but wiped out the Native Americans? What would America look like had we learned the real story of Christopher Columbus? What would America be like if all students learned the real story of the African slave trade, where African kings and queens, tribesmen and tribeswomen, scholars, traders, farmers were captured and enslaved? I always reflect on what my life would have been Had we taught that Africa was a thriving continent rich with beautiful people and natural resources that European colonizers repeatedly raped and pillaged, rather than narrative where we were monkeys swinging on trees. Being on lockdown gave me an opportunity to learn more about America and how we ended up in a place where in 2020, there is a segment of the population that hates me and my beautiful Black sons because of the color of our skin. It also gave me an opportunity to determine how I was going to fight racism. This process started long ago, and so often the case through our numerous talks, debates, and hypothetical scenarios, Karen has taught me not only how systemic and institutionalized racism works, but show how it has been ingrained in the very fabric of America. Our numerous conversations, experiences, and solutions-filled strategies led us to start Wise Dog Strategic Solutions, LLC, where we will offer professional support to individuals, groups, business, and communities seeking to create more inclusive spaces. One day in the spring, we found ourselves in one of the many Black Lives Matter protests, and we found ourselves marching through downtown on I-95, and we stood and we sat with people of all walks of life, white, Black, Latino, gay, straight, lesbian, rich, poor, people who were concerned about racial injustice. And we couldn't help but wonder, all of those people singing, screaming Black Lives Matter, what were they going to do when all of the protests and the news media and everything died down? And we often say that Black Lives Matter have to matter when we get back into the boardrooms, when it's time to do promotion, when it's time to hire, when it's time to fire. I often wonder why neighborhoods were segregated in Staten Island. We lived in the Black neighborhood, AKA the ghetto. The other side of Staten Island, was where the rich white people lived. In fact, there was a part of Staten Island that was tagged no nigger land. But how did this segregation happen? It wasn't until recent that I learned about redlining, the practice of denying Black people mortgages that kept us out of white neighborhoods, AKA the suburbs. You can read about it in the book entitled The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, or you can talk to Karen, as this is her area of expertise. And so many other things were discovered during this pandemic about what Black folks contributed in this country. So one of the things I had to find was a way to cope. And how we were able to do that is that we protested. We took this fight back to our boardrooms and our businesses. We stayed connected through streaming platforms. My fraternity, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, Epsilon Iota chapter, did an uplift series of community conversations via Zoom, which dealt with and focused on the impact of COVID on the Black community, as well as our fight for equality against police brutality. In ending, I just want to say that this pandemic has not only provided a time for reflection and introspection, but it's also fueled the fire. We are out here. We are registering people to vote. We are trying to get people to the polls, because Karen mentioned we have a serious election, an election that is going to have consequences to come for maybe decades upon decades. So, in conclusion, I would like to say I've tried to find a lining in this, a silver lining in this pandemic. For me, it was spending precious time with my family. Although Karen was out, she was working every day. As a good leader, she felt that if she had people doing the work for the people, that she needed to be there as well. ACES provided us an opportunity to work from home. We are back at work now. Our boys are looking to do their next move. But one thing has not changed, is that we continue to be in the fight. Not only are we fighting systemic and institutionalized racism, but we are fighting just some of the things that happen right here in our city, the uptick in violence. And we believe that we need a community to come together. It's not about Black or white, it's about what's right. And we need to come together and continue this fight. And I'm glad that Storytellers New Haven will be a part of that fight. Thank you. Yeah, you're muted.
Thank you, Kevin. I had no idea what you were going to share tonight, and listening to you recount what life has been since March took me on the full roller coaster of emotion, of the heartbreak and the outrage and the feeling of focus and empowerment. And so I thank you for that. That was really beautifully told, and really, really drew me in. I think you were really wrapping up with something that was coming to mind for me, which was in a time of such loss, it's often been hard to think about, what's the upside of it or what's the silver lining of it. And I think you were sort of ending there around what you see as the lessons out of it or the uptake. So can you just say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no, certainly what I believe has happened is that there's been a reckoning in America. And I think what's happening is that people are being forced to draw the lines, right? In the book Anti-Racist, you're either racist or you're anti-racist, right? And for me, the upsetting thing is to see people that you grew up with and you thought were friends, at least when you were kids, who harbor these feelings. And I wish that I knew that back in the day, and perhaps we could have taken care of it a whole different way, right? But I also think it's a reckoning. I think that the people who want equity and who want equality and who want to see a just world are continuing to fight that. But it's just as much as we have people who are on the front lines fighting that, we have that many people who are fighting against our very existence in this country as Black people. And I think that's the disheartening thing, that you have to ask the question, why? But one of the things, and many memes that I've seen, is that that really touches home for me is the one that says white people should be glad that we're only asking for equity and not revenge. And that statement packs a lot for me.
Yeah. Thank you. We do have a comment in here that's talking about how this time we've been in of pandemic has birthed some great work, and someone is excited to see the continued outcome. So thinking about the work, I know how much coaching means to you, and I know how devastating it was to be in March on the verge of the state championship and not get to play it. You declared it, but not get to play it, and so something that you poured so much into didn't continue, and you ended up birthing some other things. So tell us a little bit more about, where do you see these things that you've birthed going? The podcast, or the Wise Dog Company, or any of the things that have been birthed?
The podcast, I'm going to continue to do that, line some people up, and we've talked about even wanting to interview some of our tellers as part of this program. And I also was encouraged by your series that you did when you decided you were going to, interview some people that and just kind of talk about, have these conversations about race relations. But I also think that with Wise Dog, I think, again, you and I, we're hashing it out still, but I think we're going to always have the opportunity to have these conversations with our community. I think it's much needed. And I also think that we've established enough credibility that, we're in it just to see that everyone wins. And so I would like to see us get that up and running. So we will continue to work on that. So it's really those two, the podcast, and, hopefully come December, we'll be back for basketball season. If not, I understand that we had to do some things to try to get over this pandemic. And we will have some alternatives to do. But my hope is that we'll be playing basketball and simultaneously working on the podcast and getting Wise Dog up and running. Of course, continue with and Storytellers.
Absolutely. You spoke a lot about the messages, the lessons, and the time spent with your biological sons. You have all these other young men who look up to you as a father figure through coaching. I'm interested in, what you heard. I know you weren't in the gym with them, but I know you keep in close contact with your players off season as well. I'm curious what you've heard from young men through this time of COVID and this time of racial unrest. What are some of the things you're hearing from high schoolers?
Well, that's a great question. So usually in the off season, they play ball, and they got an opportunity to play travel ball. They had some facilities open in Connecticut and in New Haven. So, in Massachusetts. So they were very happy about that. The conversations about the unrest I was typically having with my seniors, because those are the ones that were on their way into the so-called real world, right? And those are the ones who didn't get an opportunity to have a prom. They didn't have an opportunity to do a senior trip. They didn't have the opportunity. They didn't have a proper opportunity to say bye to their friends, and that was a tough way to end their high school experience. So our conversation was, and it always is, about fairness and equity and equality and kind of dealing with adversity. And in terms of our meeting that we're planning next week with the team, we'll discuss their role, because they want to do have a campaign through the athletic department about their lives mattering. So those young kids are watching, but to be honest, they're still concerned about the spatter of violence that takes place in their city. And so as much as it is on the minds of adults, the pandemic and the social unrest, they're really concerned, and we have to continue to address the spat of violence in our city, which I believe is only being caused by a certain number of people, right? Because we have a lot of great kids in this city, and we have to, as Rev Kev, continue to intervene with them when they get off the porch.
Absolutely. Thanks. So some of our YouTube viewers have a few questions. So one, you mentioned Wise Dog a couple of times. Someone's asking you, what is Wise Dog?
Well, I'll defer to you.
A little plug. Wise Dog Strategic Solutions is a full service consulting firm that is working
All right, frozen. So what Karen's saying is that we're going to work around racial equity, and we're going to help communities, organizations, individuals navigate those spaces. Because as easy as it is for us to say Black Lives Matter and things of that nature, it's a difficult conversation to have, and everybody's not necessarily in a place to have it. So Karen and I want to be able to help people do that.
Right. And so much of this awareness has led people to say, so now what? What's the next step? So companies, organizations might make statements about Black Lives Matter, might make commitments, and the work is then how to turn that into action. And so that's really what Wise Dog Strategic Solutions will help folks do. We have a very special viewer that I have to read her comment. Janice Walton, otherwise known as your mom, is on. Who said, "Great job, Kevin. Well said, and I really enjoyed your story."
Oh, thank you, Mother. I'm glad. Maybe next time I'll tell a story about you.
Oh, she'll love that. She'll love that. And we will share. And your plug for your son's music also got a question here about where can we hear more of K-Dub's music. So we can post the links to his SoundCloud and things in our Facebook and YouTube comments, so that you all can hear some of that. So with
like he says, on all streaming platforms.
He is on all streaming platforms. That he is. K-Dub. So thank you, Kevin. I please everyone join me in thanking Kevin, our co-founder, for his generous sharing of story with us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as I mentioned, we are booking our tellers for our fourth season, our 2020-2021 season. And if you would like to share the screen with us, as Rev Kev and Kevin did this evening, you can simply contact us on Facebook. You can send us an email at storytellersnewhaven@gmail.com, or just give us a call. Let us know that you'd like to tell, and we will get you into our schedule. We meet one Monday a month. For now, we plan to continue in the virtual mode. And just to mark your calendar for our next few dates, October 19th, we'll be back, November 9th, and December 14th. Also, if you want to go back and revisit any of the powerful stories that have been told, we do encourage you to check out our YouTube channel and take a listen at the stories or the powerful conversations that we've had around race equity across divides. So we look forward to seeing you at our next session. Kevin, any final words? Did I leave anything out?
Sorry, I had to turn the volume down. No, other than thanks for tuning in and thanks for being with us. Again, we never thought that, we never imagined that we'd be going this strong, and we're only as good as our audience. We will just continue to encourage people to sign up and share their story. There's 130,000 people in New Haven, and that means there are 100,000 people, and everybody has a story to tell. And even our people who have told before, please feel free to share with us your willingness to sit in the chair again, and you will definitely be considered.
Yes, we have some great repeat tellers signed up already, so it's exciting. Some new voices and some repeat tellers will tell a new story. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you to Rev Kev for the behind the scenes and for being our teller tonight. Thank you, Kevin Walton, for being our teller, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Have a good night.